Good morning, everybody. Today is October 28th, 2024, and we're here this morning to talk about the Hub Spending Report System and give a demonstration of the system. And as many of you know, the Hub Spending Report System has been used for many years for a lot of state agencies to provide detailed information about the spending that they've done and what vendors were used and which ones were hub vendors. So it's used as a source of a lot of our reporting for goods and services for your agencies. It captures the agencies that use it are cabinet agencies, council of state agencies, support agencies, and one university, School of Science and Math, uses it for their source for hub goods and services spending. The only state agencies that do not are DOT, Ports Authority, and Education Lottery. They all have their own systems that are separate that they use to report. So there's no community colleges or other universities or school systems that report using the Hub Spending Report System. But we wanted to give you an overview of what the spending report system looked like. Might not be a bad thing if I don't know if Leslie can do a quick snap poll and ask how many people have actually been in Hub SRS before. We've got about 30 people on the call, but that doesn't mean that all of them are familiar with the spending report system. And what we intend to do today is kind of show you what it looks like, the new version, kind of touch base on where you can look for some resources and training for it, and how you would access the older data, because this new version of Hub SRS that we're testing out, and we're hoping to spend the next week to test it with everybody who's got access to it, and be able to give us feedback and say, it looks great, no problems, move forward, or hey, I saw this, it didn't look like it should be counted, and let us know that so that we can go in and work with our GDAC counterparts who are developing it with SAS so that we can make sure that things are running correctly. We had the option to go ahead and just take the data that's in our SRS and move it over to our Hub reporting system in EVP. But we said, let's wait on that until we give the users of it a chance to take a look at it and see if they see anything weird that we may have missed. So it's looking like we're getting a fair amount of responses. About half the folks on here have responded, and about 2/3 of the respondents have not used SRS before, so that's fine. And we did send out an email this morning, and I've gotten a couple of responses already for that said, here's the list of everybody who's got access to SRS. So if you're not on that list, you will not be able to log into SRS to test it. So you need to let us know, hey, I need access to that so we can grant it and you can log in. Because if you're not on that list and you try to log in, you're going to be very frustrated. So we don't want that to happen. Not everybody who gets the goods and services reminders is necessarily going to need to get into Hub Spending Report System. So we're letting folks know this is who we have for your organization who has access to this. Leslie, are you at a state where you feel like you can share your screen?
Are you able to see?
Let's see here.
I have the
Yes, I think
spinning report. Okay,
yep,
sounds great.
yep. All right. So this is the new version of the Hub Spending Report System. And one reason that I know that is because at the very top, right under that blue bar, it does not say legacy. So this is going to cover everything from Q2 of fiscal year 23-24 into the future. Everything from before that time, Q1 of fiscal year 23-24 is going to be covered by the legacy version of the system. And uh, I don't know if you can move your mouse a little bit, Leslie. Can you show us where the if people on this page where they would find the link to the legacy data? So right down there. So this is the Hub Spending Report system, and there's 4 tabs at the top. The first one is on the left is About, and that's where you would find the link to the legacy version. So if you ever lose the email that I sent this morning that has the links to the new system, to the RISE training, and the legacy system, if you can get into the new system, you'll have access to the link to the legacy data. So if you ever need to look further back in time than Q2 of last fiscal year, you'll be able to go back and see it. The reason that we have two systems now is that the legacy data used NCAS data from the North Carolina accounting system, and the new system uses North Carolina financial system data. So that NCFS went online last year. There are some changes to how the data is captured, managed, shared. So not all the fields were quite the same as they were in NCAS. So we kind of had to do a translation of the old to the new. And so that's why we have 2 systems. We're looking at the new system right now. Leslie, would you mind going to summary by quarter? So the next tab over from About is summary by quarter. And this will allow you to say, hey, for the default right here is showing right below where it says summary by quarter, it will show your filters. And as you choose more filters, all of the filters will show up there in those little bubbles at the top, right next to where it says filters : So right now, the only thing we're filtering on is 2025 Q1. And down below that, it also says in red, quarter equals 2025 Q1. So before we go into the filters, can we just scroll down and let people see what those fields look like right there? So under contract type, hub status, hub category, can we see those? So we've got term contract showing there. We've got total up at the top, and the data that you see there is for everybody that we see, because we have access to everybody's data. You all will just have access to your own agency. If anybody would like to volunteer their agency as an example, we can filter it so that we just see your agency. But until then, we'll just go with this as it is. So as Leslie was scrolling down, you'll see right now we're looking at services. And if you scroll up just a tiny bit, Leslie, okay, yeah, that's good. So you'll see that block on the far left, services is in a big block. Everything that's to the right of that is for services. So it's got the subtotal services at the top, which is the $130 million, which is 30% of the overall spend. And then right below that is the subtotal of hub spend, the $7.4 million in hub spend. And then below that, you've got the individual hub spend categories, and it will only show a category if there was dollars spent with a vendor in that category. So right now it's showing Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian, female, and disabled. It's not showing disadvantaged because we didn't have any spending with disadvantaged in there. So you may see it where you only see, just for an example, Black and female, and it would be the only 2 rows showing. That just means all the other ones have 0 in them. And when we get to the point of transferring this information to the EVP hub stats, it will put zeros in the places where you don't see a hub category here. Otherwise, it will transfer this information from here into the appropriate box in EVP. Down at the bottom of this, it shows the subtotal of non-hub spend. So that 122 million, that's anybody who's not a hub. That's the spending that was done in that category with non-hub vendors. And it is set up so that at the top of this, it shows term contract, then it shows commodities, and then it shows services. And they're all set up the same way. If there's no hub spend in a category, you will not see that category. So let's see that. So that's commodities, and then there's term contract. So that term contract is a good example. So we've got Black, Hispanic, Asian American, and female, but we don't have disadvantaged, we don't have disabled, and we don't see American Indian in there. So those are categories where there was no term contract spend with vendors that held those certification categories. This is looking at this by, so this tab, summary by quarter, has sort of sub tabs underneath it. And we're looking at total spend by contract type. So that's term contract, commodities, services. If we click over to the next tab, total spend by PO and non-PO, it keeps it in that same format, basically, but it adds how much of the spend was purchase order related versus non-purchase order related, basically direct pay. So if you wrote a check directly to somebody and it didn't go through e-procurement, it would be counted in that non-PO dollar amount. And for term contract, we shouldn't see anything in the non-PO category for term contract. But if we scroll down a little bit, we might see it under commodities and services. So you'll see that there was, for commodities, it looks like there was a total of $128 million in non-PO payments and 71 million in PO payments. And this is payments. It's not, we created a PO and it's for 3 years for $300,000. This is the actual dollars out the door to the vendors that were used. So it's not looking forward. It's saying this is what actually happened during this time period. And it's based on the date that vendors were paid. So they have to be hub certified at the time they were paid, and the system will recognize that. And please, if you have any questions as we're going along, please ask them, because if you have questions, other people might have questions. And if you've never seen this before, you may be feeling a little lost, and that's okay. The good thing about the SRS system is we can't mess it up. It's read only, so we can't go in and delete anything. We can only take a look at things, and your reports, you can filter them however you want. And it's not too hard to change the filters or delete the filters. So if you have questions, let us know as we're going through. Can we take a look at the next tab over, total spend by hub classification? Okay, so this does not break it out into term contract, commodities, or services. This is just by the certification category. So this is like a total for Q1 of 2025 for the different certification categories. So it's showing under the Black class category, $5 million, 141,000 under Hispanic, 16 million under Asian American, a little less than $1 million under American Indian. Female had 16 million, disabled owned had 3 million, and then we had non-hub of 30,000, not 921. And that non-hub, that is actually a hub vendor, and we're working on their classification. It's an EVP issue that that we need to work on for our certification management part that hasn't translated into SRS correctly. That's the kind of thing, if you see this non-hub and you're like, what is that? Why is that there? Um, you can figure that out in the detail tab, but you can also ask us and say, "Hey, I'm seeing this non-hub thing in here for me. Where do I put that when it goes over to EVP?" And we can help you figure that out because there's one vendor um, that maybe two that's in this situation. So it's not that they're counting people who are not eligible for hub certification. It's just that EVP didn't have a category for it. It was confused by something in the system, and we're working to get that fixed. Um, if we can take a look at the total spend by NCSBE, non-NCSBE, it's very similar to what we were just looking at for the hub spend, but it's also kind of similar to that PO, non-PO piece in that it breaks it out and it is by term contract, commodities, and services. And it'll show you how much spending you did with NCSBE certified firms and how much for with non-NCSBE certified firms. This is not something that affects your hub quarterly reporting because at this point we don't have reporting requirements on NCSBE, but Hub Spending Report System gets the information about that certification. So we wanted to be able to incorporate it in here. When we were asked, how much spend do you do with NCSBEs? We can at least have this information that we can say, yeah, we've spent $1 million with NCSBEs, at least, yeah, and we can say how much of that was with term contract and the other different categories. NCSBE, great question, Amy. Thank you for asking. NCSBE stands for North Carolina Small Business Enterprise. It's a certification that the Hub Office manages, and the firms have to be headquartered in North Carolina. They have to be for profit. They have to have $1.5 million or less in annual revenue, and they have to have 100 employees or less. Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good. Yeah, that's a good point. NCSBE, right, stands for North Carolina State Board of Elections as well. So that's a good point. That's not. This is about not small business enterprise, not State Board of Election. Um, but we can sort. We can filter things based on just your agency. And I know that you didn't necessarily volunteer that, but I appreciate the question and the clarification. Does that make sense? Do you think that's going to be confusing going forward, Amy? I'm hoping you'll type in that makes sense. Okay. All right. Good deal. So Leslie, do you want to try maybe go back to the total spend by contract type um, and then select a filter and um, maybe for the, let's see, let's go to entity group if you don't mind. And we'll just uh, click on the first one you see, support. Okay. So this is going to show us the support agencies that we have, and Board of Elections would be included in this. This is any agency that they don't report directly to the governor. The governor does not appoint a secretary over them, and they don't have a directly elected official that runs their organization. So, like, we count Wildlife Resources under here. I think Ports Authority may show up under here, as well as Board of Elections and a few others as well. But this just basically filters out all the other agencies and it's just counting the support agencies in here. Um, and so those dollars are going to be less at the top. If you can scroll up to the top there, the total amount, see that's $46 million, whereas before it was a bit higher than that. I think it was over 100 million. So that just shows that we're looking at a smaller group and a smaller dollar amount of information. Leslie, is there anything else in particular that you would want to show people about this screen?
Nope.
Okay. So if we don't have any more questions about this one, let's go over to summary by month. And again, if this looks very, very similar to summary by quarter. The difference is you have the ability to filter, and that filter up at the top shows 2025, and it shows July 2024 through 6/2024. But we can change that if we go to filters, down a little bit. Yep. And there's we can change the month, and we can drag that back and forth. If we just wanted to see like August and July, let's see if we can try to do that. Yeah. So just do that and then click off of it. So that should show just July and August. And September should be in there. So we should have seen a difference in the total amount at the top. So that's showing 283 or 93 million. If we change that month and like pull it back to just July. Okay, and then hit, yep. So that knocked that total down to 137 million. So that's a little less than half of what we saw when it was July and August. So this is actually a way that when the fiscal year is done, you can go in and say, because most of the reports are quarterly, but you may want to see how you're doing year to date. And this will allow you to do that. And if you're like in March and you're like, I want to see how much I've done. I know we had January and February and our quarter's not done, but I want to see how we're doing for the year. You could do that. Go from July 2024 through February of 2025, and it would show you what your hub percentage was at the end of that. And if you, Leslie, if you go to that, still keeping this filter, if you just click on total spend by hub classification, if everybody notices that the total was a 137 million, and then the hub spend was 9 million, over towards the right in that percent of total column, it shows 6 point, I think that says 66%. So that is the percentage hub that was achieved in that time period. Overall, we typically, when we report it in EVP, we're putting in the data by here's the term contract, here's the commodities, here's the services, and it will calculate for each of those what the percentage was in EVP. But if we want to see the overall, we want to know the whole percentage. And this is a way that you can go in and say, okay, given this time period, what's my percentage? So you can track that as things go. This is not going to be real time. So it does take time to get data and compile it because it's taking data from EVP, or yeah, actually there is some data from EVP, from e-procurement, and from NCFS, and it's got to combine it all to provide it on a monthly basis and a quarterly basis. So that usually takes 10 days to get that accomplished. So you can't go in October 1st and say, show me September, because that data will not be in there yet. You have to wait 10 days after that period ends before it will show up in SRS. Okay, so can we go over to details? All the rest of the tabs on the summary by month are the same thing as summary by quarter. the NCSBE, the PO versus non-PO, it's all the same. It's just that you have the option to say which months you want to look at as opposed to a dedicated quarter. So if we take a look at details, when you click on details, it'll show you several specific columns, and you can scroll through that if you want to. I've never found this particularly useful on its own. I always export it to Excel. And if you go over, if you see, oh yeah, so you can scroll to see all the fields that are there. However, if you want to export it, right above that dark blue uh, header line is that little box with 3 dots. And if you click on that or hover on it, Leslie, did you click on that or did you just have to hover on it?
I clicked on it.
Okay, so go ahead and click on it again. And it gives you a bunch of options. And if we want to export it to Excel, we click on Export Data. And it will give us this. You theoretically could just hit OK and it would export it. And it would try to put it in the format that you see it on the screen. However, it may not give you everything. So whenever I'm exporting from here, that bottom box that's empty right now, I click on that to get the detailed data. And up at the top, it will calculate how many rows it's going to download. And that's showing it went from like 1 to 78,000 to 1 through 150 something, 155,000 rows. You can only export 150,000 rows at a time. So for most people, you won't have a problem with that. This comes up with DHHS and DPS agencies that are really large and do a lot of spending throughout the quarter. If we had selected commerce, we may not have so many that we would have to split our export. But if you do come up with this and you say, oh, there's more than 150,000 rows, if you want all the data, you have to do 2 exports. And you have to say one, you in that row field, you would type 1 to 150,000, and then you would click OK. It would export those 150,000 lines of data. You would come back here and do this export again. And in the rows, you would type 150,001 through whatever the rest of this is, 155,709. And then it would export the rest of that, and you'd have it in 2 spreadsheets. And you can combine those spreadsheets if you want to. But this probably won't be an issue for most folks on a given quarter because they probably won't have that much activity in the Hub spending report system that they would need to do that. But Leslie, would you mind going ahead and can you cancel this and let's do a smaller, go to the filter and let's select a different agency. Let's do DOA just because we're DOA. Okay. All right, so you see we changed the filter so it's loading. So now go and do that export again. Data, and you see it's got about 3,000 lines. So go ahead and click OK on that. And it's not necessarily instantaneous. Depending on how much data you've got, it takes a little time to create the download. Yep, so if you can open that file. We just want to show you what it looks like in Excel. And so the headers up here, we've got the account group, subgroup, description, budget code, the entity, which entity group you're in, fund code, is it a service, commodity, term contract? You'll be able to see what the vendor name was. Was it a PO purchase or a direct payment? The quarter will show up, the vendor location, and you'll be able to see that they're Hub certified or if they're NCSBE certified. and the dollar amount. And if you did it by PO, you would be able to see what the purchase order was and what the description of that purchase was. So you can get pretty detailed in your analysis of this. So you can say, if I wanted to know how much spending I was doing with a particular vendor, just FSI, because they've got a state term contract, you could filter on forms and supply, and you could see how many times you spent anything with them and what the dollar amount was for each of those items. So you can get creative with how you do this. This could help you see how much am I spending on commodities, what commodities am I using, um, and who am I spending money with? So you don't necessarily just have to look at the hub vendors, but you could say, hey, I'm spending an awful lot of money on commodities in this area, and it's not a term contract. So I don't have to spend the money with this particular vendor. Um, are there any hub vendors that do that commodity? And you can actually, if it should be a commodity code that's a UNSPSC commodity code, you could use that as a search in EVP. And we're not going to show that here, but you could go back to the EVP vendor search and say, show me hub vendors that have this commodity code. So you could see other vendors that you might be able to invite to bid on certain projects. Okay. Leslie, is there anything in particular you think I'm missing out of this that we need to cover?
Nope, I think that's good.
Okay. So do you happen to have the Rise site up and available? If you don't, I do.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now.
Okay. All right. So let me share my screen real quick. And I wanted to share this with everybody because this is rather than a user manual, we've got this training system called Rise, or I guess Rise Articulate. And it basically takes you through a number of topics related to the Hub spending report system. There's a little bit on just how you navigate in Rise, and there's information on logging in, and you can go through this whole thing and see how you log in. We do use NCID for this. So it's basically like if you're logging into SharePoint or your computer for the day, you basically go in and log in with your NCID. Honestly, logging in is the trickiest thing that I have with SRS. Sometimes I have to clear my cache to make it work. And if your NCID has been inactivated for some reason, and this morning mine was, so I wasn't able to get into SRS this morning. They fixed that, so I should be able to get in now. But if you have access to SRS and you're trying to log in and you're having trouble, first thing to try is to clear your cache and try again, or to try a different browser, because I was trying Edge this morning and then I had to try Chrome just to make sure there wasn't something weird going on between the different browsers. And when that didn't work, I reached out to our NCID administrator and said, hey, something looks like it's not working right. Can you check on that? And he was able to do that. Not in time for me to run the slides today, but he was able to do that. And so next time I need to go in and log in, I should be able to get there. So back to this Rise thing, it goes through the different tabs. And if you notice these little buttons popped up, those are not actually part of the website. They're just part of the training. And if you clicked on them, it would give you a little bit more information about the type of item that it's nearby. So if I clicked over here by this button, it's like the full screen icon or the details. This is the detail tab, and you can click on that to enlarge it. And as you scroll down, it'll show you some more information, and there's some things where you can do like a little quiz. It's not a pass fail. Nothing's gonna go wrong if you answer something incorrectly. It's just gonna tell you what's going on. So let me see if I'll just answer hide and seek, and it'll say that's incorrect, and you can take it again. And I could select something else and say, oh, that's correct. And I could take it again if I want to. And I can click continue, and it'll take me to the reports tabs, which is where we spend most of our time in SRS looking at the reports tabs, other than downloading the detail data. There's information on exporting reports. There may be some additional updates to SRS after we launch, particularly the column headers on the export. We've asked for them to be modified so that we have the data that we tend to use a little bit more. And we did reach out to some of our more frequent SRS users to ask their opinion, to try to get vendor data easier to see, and be able to see, okay, here's the spending that I had with this vendor. Were they Hub certified? What was their category? Was it a PO purchase? So put all that information as close to the left side of the spreadsheet as possible, and put the other stuff that could be interesting but maybe not used all the time a little further to the right, so you don't have to scroll over or hide columns to see the things you really want to see. Okay, so I scheduled this meeting for 30 minutes, and we're at 10:38, so we're a little bit beyond our time. So I'm going to stop here.